Good afternoon. I call this meeting of the House Privileges and Elections Committee to order. I am now going to turn it over. Do you need to do voice, or we can do recording? We can do recording. And we'll now take attendance. Please mark your presence. Yeah, we're a little rusty. All right, and if the clerk will please close the roll. And we do have a quorum. Awesome, thank you. So I see some new faces that are not usually at our Privileges and Elections meeting, so I just want to go over how we run this committee. So we will have one item on the agenda, and that is House Joint Resolution 6007, patroned by Delegate Willett. He will come forward, he will talk about the bill, then we'll take questions from members that are on the dais. He will answer those, we'll have conversation, at which point we will then go to public comment. I'm going to ask you how many of you are here to speak for and how many of you are to speak against. We'll get a visual understanding of how many are in the room, and we'll set a time for those in position of for the resolution. We will set the equal amount of time for those that are against the resolution, and we'll take all testimony in the room first. We will then move and do the same thing for online testimony. Should we run out of any time, because we do have to get to the floor eventually, you are welcome, whether you get to testify or not, you are welcome to enter your comments on hodspeak, and we'll make sure that you have that link before you leave so that we have the public record of your comments. And with that, if the clerk does not have any other announcements, we're good to go. Then we will invite Delegate Willett for his first time before Privileges and Elections. But Delegate Willett, please tell us about your joint resolution.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am one of those new faces, and it is great to be with this august group this afternoon. Madam Chair, HJR 6007 creates a narrow, temporary exception allowing the General Assembly to modify one or more congressional districts between the regular 10-year decennial reapportionments. If another U.S. state redraws its congressional districts mid-decade or for other reasons than completing its decennial redistricting or complying with the court order. So let me just walk the committee through what the resolution does, and maybe more significantly, what it does not do, just to be clear about that. This resolution is about keeping options open. Options about essentially preserving flexibility for Virginia as we deal with the issues of the day. This resolution creates a temporary change to the Constitution. It has what we would call a sunset clause. It only runs through 2030. This allows the voters to ultimately decide whether we exercise the option or not. That's not our choice. That will be the voters' decision. They will actually decide at the ballot box if this measure goes forward. To the more significant part, what the resolution does not do. This resolution does not eliminate the Virginia Redistricting Commission. It does not expand our authority to change legislative state districts between decennial reapportionments. We will never or not now be redrawing our own districts. It does not change the current legislative lines today. As I mentioned, the voters will decide whether there's a change to the lines. This is just creating a process that gives us the option to make those changes in extraordinary circumstances. For a little more elaboration, and I would welcome your questions, I cannot emphasize enough the limited scope of this change. I am very sensitive to the fact that we are amending the Constitution here. But again, we are amending the Constitution only to create an option. There's no mandate in this language that we do anything. And again, ultimately, probably the most important thing I can stress is that we're leaving the decision here as to whether something is done to the voters. They will go to the ballot box if this goes forward. The constituents I am hearing from, most of them are concerned. They want a voice. They want a voice in what's happening nationally, in what's happening in other states, and they'd like to be able to address that. Our hand has been forced here. We certainly didn't wake up a few weeks ago and think that we were going to have this process, but what other states have done has forced that hand, has forced this action. And again, I want to stress that we are not permanently changing the Constitution. This would be effective only through 2030. At that point, we could certainly re-amend the Constitution, but again, we'd have to come through this whole process all over again to make those changes. Madam Chair, that's an overview of the resolution. It's actually pretty straightforward. A couple of changes to it. I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Delegate Willett. If the members will use your request to speak button, I will be using that, and I see Delegate Bloxham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, it's my history on this committee. I always look for process, how it works and all that. But my first question is, you keep saying that the voters will draw the lines. The way I'm reading it is we get to draw the lines. The voters say they want it done or not. And follow-up question to that while you're answering that, the trigger, you keep insinuating that we don't have to do anything. But the way I'm reading it is, if the trigger hits, then we will do something. Can you answer those two questions for me, please?
Delegate Willett.
Madam Chair, thank you, and I appreciate the questions. And no, if I did misspeak and say the voters, the General Assembly would still have to draw the lines if the voters decide we're going to go forward with the process. So that's the voter part of this. They still ultimately decide whether or not there's a change to the Constitution. If there's a change, then yes, there's the option to withdraw the lines. There's no mandate. The extraordinary circumstances that are referenced, if another state, like Texas, for example, were to redraw, as they've done, redraw their lines, that would give us the option to do so.
And so I think I heard the delegate also point us to lines 30 and 31 shall be authorized to, but it doesn't say must.
Follow-up question.
Delegate Bloxham.
Thank you. So walk me through the triggering. I want to understand. So the voters say, yes, we want to have the option. And the General Assembly, I assume, will say, yes, we want to draw the lines. And I'm trying to work through the timeline, because for this to be effective, for us to have, as you say, a say in national politics, this would actually have to happen by intuition the first day of session. And could you walk me through the timeline, how you think that this could be put in place?
Madam Chair, Delegate Bloxham, you are correct. It is a tight time frame. All we're doing today is the first part of that time frame. Just like any constitutional amendment, it requires a vote by this body, or by the General Assembly, an intervening election, which would be the election coming up next week, and then the subsequent vote of this body, meaning we would be back here in the 26th session and have to vote on it. If all of that happens, those three things, then it would go to a referendum, which would follow. I think there's a requirement to be 90 days after the action of the legislature.
Madam Chair, so
Delegate Bloxham.
I understand so far.
Okay.
But we haven't hit the timeline. We've got a primary. We've got 45-day early voting. I stand to correct you that we are already in voting now. We've been voting now for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We've got 1 million people already voted. So we're in the middle of voting now, is my interpretation of that. But I still can't get to where this would have to be in November's election. If you want to rechange the drawing of the lines, which I assume is the purpose of this, for us to have a bearing on national politics, which is the reason for this, I'm trying to get from this point through November.
Right. Madam Chair and Delegate Bloxham, I think when you're saying November, you mean November 2026.
The next congressional elections, for this to have bearing on national politics, we have to
Delegate Bloxham, if I could interrupt, I definitely understand your question, but as with previous constitutional amendments, we have always had enabling legislation. And that enabling legislation can talk to the timeline. So I'd like to stick for this meeting to the actual text of the joint resolution.
Madam Chair.
Delegate Bloxham.
With all due respect, this is not unlike any other piece of legislation that we've had through P&E, where I've always tried to figure out how it will work. through the whole
Delegate
process.
Bloxham, if I can stop you there. As you will recall, since 2024, I know you've been on this committee since before that, before I even joined. But at this time, since 2024, I have been sitting in this chair. So you may not have seen it done this way previously, but I will ask, with all due respect, that you keep this to the text of the resolution. If there's something that you want to opine in a comment, that is fine at the appropriate time. But for questions, we are dealing with the text of the joint resolution in front of us. Do you have another question pertaining to the text?
No, ma'am. I'll wait to opine later.
Thank you. Delegate Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, question for the patron. If this bill is passed in this current form, does it cause the clerk of courts to violate the law specifically, and we've heard a lot about this, Virginia Code Section 3013?
Madam Chair, and responding to Delegate Green's question, no, it is not. That provision, which has been mentioned more in the media, I think, than anywhere else, is an obsolete provision. I think it dates back to the 70s in terms of requiring the clerks of court to post notice of the change on the courthouse door. I know a lot of clerks of court, and I think they've advanced tremendously in their technology and ability to notify the public, which is really the requirement here is
Delegate
notice.
Willett,
Yeah.
I'm going to help you.
Okay.
That is something that we can also opine at another time. But that is part of ongoing litigation from a current case that I think some of the members started in Tazewell. And that is where that will be decided as far as, I guess, the Attorney General's opinion and some of the other things.
Madam Chair, I just had some clerks who contacted me today who were very nervous about this.
Okay, well then, if we want to get into it, we can talk about how that's old language and it no longer applies to this part of the process, that's for after it's passed the second time. But I think they'll be discussing that on November 5th.
Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Waxman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I had a couple of questions for the patron, if I might, that has been asked to me by several of my constituents. The first question that they've asked me is, why are we doing it at this point in time with the elections coming up less than a week away, the election day? And the second part of that is, are we going to be making it a point of tying the Virginia Constitution to what other states do in their process?
Madam Chair, Delegate Wax, let me take the first part of that question. And I think, as I said in introducing the resolution, this was not our choice. Our hand was forced here in terms of what's happening nationally right now with the changes to the electoral, really the electoral process, with which has happened, particularly in Texas, North Carolina, Michigan, now Indiana's looking at a change as well. So that's the context in which this comes. The timing, yes, it's extraordinary and certainly a compressed time frame, but those are the facts. That's the situation we've been presented. I didn't quite get the second part of the question. If you could please repeat that, I'd appreciate it.
Can you repeat your question?
Yes, I could. I've just had several constituents express a concern that the trigger for this relates to what other states in the country does. And Virginia celebrating its 250th year, we are Virginia. We're not Texas or California or those other states. And they're asking me why, once again, are we looking for actions in other states to affect our Constitution?
Madam Chair and Delegate Weiss, I've actually had really a similar question from my constituent, which is what are we going to do about the fact that other states are taking these actions? And it's essentially, you could really argue it's diluting the vote of Virginia. We've had lines that were drawn nationally through a constitutional process, and a certain number of states elected to choose that. We didn't make that up. That's a fact. It's happened in multiple states. And what I'm here to do is to represent Virginia, represent my constituents who are concerned that their vote is now being potentially ignored or lessened by the changes in what these other states are doing.
Delegate Cherry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for the patron, please. With the backdating of the dates that we're putting in this section, in your estimation, has a trigger been met and would then give us that freedom, to your words, of moving forward with a redistricting process?
Madam Chair and Delegate Cherry, I'm going to look at just the process we're creating, the options we're creating. If we pass this, those options would be there. As to whether that's been met, there's going to be subsequent discussion. As the chairwoman mentioned, we'll have enabling legislation. So I'm going to wait, if we get to that point, to let that dictate whether that's happened or not.
Follow-up question, Madam Chair?
Yes, the delegate can proceed.
One of the things that we keep talking about are other states, other states, other states, other states. Yet we have what I think is a rather unique process here in Virginia, in that we have a commission by constitutional amendment. How many of the other states do not have such a provision? How many of these other states that we keep pointing to don't have the same protections in our Constitution that we have, and allowing them to dictate what we will and won't do? For example, in Ohio, their mid-districting is mandated if a certain percentage of the population doesn't support the vote. Would that be a trigger? Would that be one? And I'm using that as a very specific example because Ohio has a rule that mid-decade redistricting is mandated if a certain percent isn't reached of agreement. So with that, how many other states are we looking at that have the same provisions that we have to overcome, or are their legislatures already given the right by their population to redistrict when they want to?
Madam Chair and Delegate Cherry, I really appreciate that question. I want to come back to where I started, which is to emphasize the respect, the deference that this resolution gives to our current state, which is having a redistricting commission. That is the Virginia Constitution. It was created with and then ratified by a very significant number of Virginia voters. That's the law. That's the Constitution of Virginia. And this resolution in no way undoes what that commission's purpose is. We will still have decennial redistricting, a decennial redistricting process that will be led by that commission. Their charge is not changed. I could not answer in terms of exactly what other states have done, just except to refer back to the legislation, which is to talk about a state in between the decennials taking an action to change their district lines when it's not required to complete an earlier redistricting or as a court order pursuant to something involving voting rights and that sort of thing. So those would be exceptions to that.
One final question, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, the delegate can proceed.
Why do we need an expiration date on it? If this is something that's necessary, if this is something that we see as being a constitutional problem, why would we put a sunset on it that says it's only for a certain period of time, as opposed to if this is a real and valid concern and it's not a response to a certain political figure, why does it have an expiration date as opposed to just allowing this something that continues to go forward? Because if it's a problem, it may be a problem after 2030. We would have to come back and go through the amending process again. So again, I'm concerned with the dates of it, of the fact that it goes backwards in time to something that may have happened at some point in antiquity, and then looks forward to a specific period of time and will retire at that and have a sunset clause. So can you address why the timing of it?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Delegate Cherry, now again, I appreciate that question. Virginia survived pretty well without needing to address this issue more so than we did with the redistricting change that was made back in 2020. Extraordinary circumstances. And as I stand here today, I hope we never face these circumstances again. I mean, it's unprecedented what's happening in the country right now. And this is our only way to address it. So I think that my thinking in drafting this the way it was done is I am very hesitant to change the Constitution. I'm an attorney, and we all are sworn to uphold the Constitution. I tread very lightly in making changes to recommending changes to the Constitution. And I think a change of this magnitude is significant. But I think putting this, if you want to call it a sunset clause or the limitation of the period, is to reflect the fact that we're hoping we never have to go through this again.
Delegate Lethwich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple questions, if I may.
We can take them one by one.
Okay. All right. So, Delegate Willett, you've indicated in your opening remarks that this does not do away with the redistricting commission, but it does actually do away with it on a temporary basis. And with that backdrop, I'm very concerned about how the voters of Virginia would be informed of this proposal to amend the Constitution, especially in the compressed time frame that we're talking about. And so if the law requires us to strictly comply with the law in terms of amending the Constitution, and our clerk's offices are required to give the people notice of at least 90 days prior to the next general election, how are our clerks going to comply with that law? And would they be violating the law if they tried to post it before 90 days, which they can't do, or after 90 days, which they can't do?
Yeah. Madam Chair, Delegate Leftwich, again, I'm going to defer to the chair's answer to that, which is there is pending litigation on that requirement and whether that's still a valid requirement or not. So I'll defer to the judicial action on that.
Madam Chair, follow-up question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Before we continue with that, because I do want to make sure that we get an answer to your question, I am going to go to council just to see what, if any, clarification we can offer on that.
Madam Chair, so the Constitution includes the requirement, or I guess more like a prohibition, that once you all have passed the constitutional amendment for the second time, you cannot have a referendum on it less than 90 days. So I believe that's the 90-day notice that you might be referring to.
That was 30-13.
So 30-13 is that really old language, and so that required, at that point, was mirroring what our previous Constitution said, which was that they had to have the 3 months notice on the courthouse door. When we amended the Constitution, the House of Delegates actually decided to change that to the 90 days requirement that we see in the Constitution now.
So, follow-up question to the patron,
Delegate
and maybe council
Delegate
wants to jump in. So, was 30-13 ever repealed?
I'll defer to council. I don't believe it was, but I'll defer to council on that.
It has not currently been repealed, no.
Okay. So, follow-up question, Madam Chair.
And I do believe that we heard that it was dealt with by the Code Commission and that there was a decision that that was something that was entirely outdated. But yes, you have a follow-up question, Delegate Leftwich?
Well, I would ask council the follow-up question is, if it hasn't been repealed, then it's still good law. And if the Code Commission, I've served on Code Commission, the Code Commission is not permitted to make substantive changes to the code, only technical changes. And I would ask the patron and or council whether or not they would consider that as a technical or, first of all, when did the Code Commission change it? And if so, it hasn't appeared in the code. Well, could you point me to that and or address whether or not that would be a technical or a substantive change to the code?
I'm not trying to be funny. I think there was some editorializing. Is there a clear question that you can ask the attorney?
Well, yes. The clear question is, in response to the statement that the Code Commission addressed that. So the first question would be, when and how did the Code Commission address that?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Thank you, Delegate. The Code Commission actually met last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. I'm losing track of time at this point. But they met to consider the Title 30 recodification where 30-13 is. And at that point, when they adopted the report, which included the repeal, that would be a piece of legislation before you all in January.
Okay. So it's still valid until that General Assembly acts on that?
Did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, that was my question. So isn't that still valid law until the General Assembly acts on that in January?
It is still in the code, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Follow-up question, Madam Chair?
Delegate Leftwich.
So if that's still valid law, how can the clerks comply with that without violating the law?
Madam Chair, Delegate Leftwich, again, I know there's active litigation on that question. I also believe the Constitution addresses the notice requirement now and the changes we made there, and certainly I would defer to the constitutional provisions.
Okay. All right, Madam Chair, I do have another
Last one. Thank you, Delegate
Leftwich. Madam
Leftwich.
Chair. So the second question deals with the fact that we've had early voting start. And again, knowing that we are required to have strict compliance with amending the Constitution. And the notice requirements will be extremely compressed. How do we deal with the voters who've already voted who are not able to consider this in their vote for the next General Assembly that must ratify this a second time?
Delegate Leftwich, I think that is beyond the scope of what we have here before us. If you would like to ask the patron a question about the language of House Joint Resolution 6007, this is the appropriate time for that. You can make your comments when we come back for comments.
Well, I understand, Madam Chair, but I guess my question is this resolution impacts those things.
And Delegate Leftwich, if that is your opinion, I'm coming back for comment. But if you have no further questions about the actual text of the resolution, then I would like to move on to the next question, and I can come back to you for your comment. That's all I'm saying.
I'm convinced that none of my questions meet your litmus test, Madam Chair.
So you're saying I can move on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Phillips?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for the patron. Yeah, I was just wondering, like for historical context, did you have any idea maybe of how many times that we've had a temporary change to the Virginia Constitution?
Madam Chair and Delegate Phillips, I'm not aware. I do consider myself a scholar of the Constitution, but I can answer. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question without looking in more detail.
I think I might be able to help you.
Go ahead.
It's the same number of times that it would have been that a sitting president asked other states to find seats with redistricting. Is there another question?
Yes, ma'am.
Delegate Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that follows up to my second question is just, when you talk about extraordinary circumstances, obviously that's a very broad term. I was just wondering, are you saying that threshold has been met? We are already in extraordinary circumstances, whatever that means?
Madam Chair and Delegate Phillips, no, we are not saying, I'm not saying, certainly, and the resolution is not saying that those circumstances have been met. The resolution does outline what constitutes a significant change. And for example, that's when a state takes action to change its electoral districts, congressional districts in this case, in between redistricting periods. They can still do it if it's pursuant to a court order or if they're completing a process that was already started. That would not be considered the trigger, using my words. But that's specified in the resolution. As to whether it's happened or not, that's for another day.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, and I just wanted to bring your attention to line 32 and 33. And it would matter if any of the states had completed their redistricting process, not just discussing it. Delegate Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate O'Quinn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions for the patron.
We can go one by one.
Yes, Madam Chair, and I will keep to your wishes of questions specific to the resolution. So, Delegate Willett, in lines 31 and 38, you reference modifying one or more congressional districts. So we have 11 in Virginia. Is it possible that you could potentially, through this scenario, redistrict 1 or 2 or 6 or 8 or all 11?
Madam Chair and Delegate O'Quinn, again, that's not what actually happens in terms of how the lines are drawn, whether they're drawn or not. That would be taken up with enabling legislation, so I would defer to that. If we pass this, I would defer to the enabling legislation.
And any map that we would pass would have to pass the, population reapportionment. There's some, population requirements that each one would have to pass.
Yes, Madam Chair, I understand that, but I'm just saying based on the language, it seems like that we could modify a handful of them as opposed to, I think you could, in a scenario, could potentially get by with modifying, say, second and first, but maybe not the 9th. So I'm just trying to figure out if that's a possibility based on this language.
Yeah.
Okay. Further question, Madam Chair?
Delegate O'Quinn.
So in line 55 and 56, in response to actions taken by another state between January 1, 2025 and October 31, 2030. Based on what another state may or may not do, or a handful of states may or may not do, there are red and blue states doing this, but regardless, who specifically gets to decide whether that tripwire's been tripped?
Madam Chair, Delegate O'Quinn, again, that's not contemplated in the resolution. That's going to be taken up with the enabling legislation in terms of exactly what that process would be, and then what it's done from that process, the timing, how the lines are drawn, whether they're drawn for all or part of the state. That would all be through the enabling legislation.
Okay, follow up, Madam Chair.
Delegate O'Quinn?
So if I'm looking at January 2025 to October 2030, we're in November 25 now, with the 26th election cycle coming. So theoretically, if we're only talking about congressional elections, am I right that you could theoretically, based on this language, draw new congressional districts for the 26, 28, and 30 election cycles?
I think that's right. I was just thinking about the scenario because it does take a minute to go through that. That certainly could happen.
Okay, Madam Chair.
I'm trying to do the math, but I think.
Sure. Okay, I have one final follow-up.
Delegate O'Quinn?
So actions taken by another state, and I understand the enabling legislation angle, but in actions taken by another state, you know, in Virginia, I can recall a situation where I split a precinct with another delegate, and this was back in the day when we did technical boundary adjustments. I think he had something like 6 voters in a precinct, and I had like 600. So we rolled those into one precinct. So does this potentially allow for the trigger to then be a technical boundary adjustment in California or in Texas that would possibly be taken into account to be the trigger to go to a full redistricting, congressional redistricting in Virginia?
Madam Chair, Delegate Quinn, the way the resolution is written now, if that technical adjustment, again, this would be subject to interpretation, if that technical adjustment was in the eyes of a court, for example, or the legislature in that case, to complete redistricting that had already started, that was in progress, or maybe had been completed, I think that would not qualify as the trigger. But again, we're getting into technicalities there as to what that line is. But if it's a continuation, I might argue, or someone might argue, no, you're just completing something that was already started.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Scott?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One, maybe 2 questions for the patron.
Yes, I will just let folks know that we do have a time that we have to be back to the floor, and I'm pretty sure there's some folks in here that want to have their say too.
Yes, ma'am. The question that I have is the statement that has been repeated, this is not to undermine the redistricting commission, but yeah, it's going to be the General Assembly that is going to determine these lines. And so that's whatever the majority party is, whether it's one side of the aisle or the other side. And that undermines the redistricting commission. Was there any consideration of making this amendment apply, that a redistricting commission would be the one to determine this if this trigger was met, or was this purposefully done to give the majority of the House of Delegates and Senate the authority to redraw the lines as they see fit?
Madam Chair and Delegate Scott, again, coming back to sort of where we started, this resolution, I hope, reflects absolute deference to the Redistricting Commission, which again was established through a constitutional amendment process. Large majority of Virginians supported that. It is not the intent to circumvent their decennial process. This is to give the option, and I have to keep emphasizing the word option. There's no mandate here. There's no mandate in any of this language that we must do we'll call it a mid-decennial redrawing. It's just into these extraordinary circumstances, which I hope we never face again. I hope we never have to use this provision again. That's another reason for the sunset. Hopefully this goes away and we'll go back to what we had originally. But that's absolutely the intent here.
Madam Chair, just one quick follow-up question. I promise it'll be quick.
Delegate Scott.
The question is, I'm trying to understand the need for this. Somebody mentioned disenfranchised voters. Our congressional districts align pretty closely with the way the popular vote goes in Virginia, slightly favoring the Democrat Party slightly not favoring the Republican Party. So I'm trying to understand why the urgency here in Virginia for this, when the way the Redistricting Commission drew our congressional lines mirrored the way our voters vote in Virginia, and our representation at the federal level is very close to the proportions of voters and the way they vote.
If I could just
Please.
correct the question, because the commission did not draw the lines. The court did.
Well, there was a special masters, but it went through that process.
So the people that drew the current maps were at the court. I just want to clarify that was it. So,
Same question is the
just want to
current-
make sure we're all
Sure.
working off the same
Same
facts.
question is, our current representation is very close to the way the people vote in Virginia, and why would we want to change that?
Madam Chair and Delegate Scott, there's nothing the resolution says that we have to change what the lines are. It gives the option to look at those lines, and maybe changes are made, maybe they're not. That's going to depend on the enabling legislation and whatever parameters are set there. There may be perfectly fine districts out there, perfectly representative districts out there, and there may be a decision made subsequent to this resolution that those are not affected. But again, I defer to the subsequent decisions.
And I would also add, if the patron does not mind, that Virginians do not exist in a vacuum. We are Americans, and one crisis in another state does impact us, and I think that's what he was talking about with the weight of each vote. I do not see any further questions from the committee, so at this time, I'm going to ask for a show of hands for how many are in the room that would like to support the resolution. That means support, you want us to vote yes. Okay, thank you. And now hands down. And then how many of you are in the room in order to speak against? Okay, so we will do, and checking on our time, you guys are gonna have comments after when we come back, sorry. So we'll have 10 minutes for each side.
Coming back at 3 or 2:30?
Well, we will have 10 minutes for each side. So before we start the clock, the first folks up will be the 4. So if you guys want to huddle up real quick, we will be going then to the against. If you all want to huddle up and set your own rules, but it will be 10 minutes that you'll need to figure out how to navigate. Then we will go to the online. We might have a little bit of a shorter amount, but again, every single person is invited to submit their written public comment should they not have the amount of time before we have to get back to the floor. You all good? Okay. All right, and please introduce yourself and what city you're from or organization, and then we will move from there. We can start the clock.
Great. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Tram Nguyen with New Virginia Majority, and we are in favor of this amendment. One of the great things about Virginia's constitutional amendment process is that voters ultimately get to decide. Virginia is not a ballot initiative state. We don't have direct democracy in which citizens can initiate a ballot initiative. We have to rely on you all as members of the General Assembly to give us an opportunity to weigh in on something as big and monumental as this. And so as Virginians, we believe that you all taking the first step today to give voters an opportunity to vote on this is a great way for us to participate directly in our democracy, and it's very critically needed at this time. Also, I want to note that no maps have been drawn yet. Should we get to that phase, any new map will have to meet Virginia's redistricting criteria. The General Assembly did pass redistricting criteria in 2021. And so for folks that are saying that this is purely a partisan grab and that Democratic priorities are going to be first and foremost center in any new map, that criteria among that is around making sure that communities of interest, including communities of color, are protected. And as an organization that represents communities of color, we believe that this amendment gives the General Assembly an opportunity to really protect our communities when it comes to the interests that we are facing and the vulnerabilities that we are facing in the midst of the world that we are living in. So we urge you to support this amendment. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, I am Jamie Lockhart here on behalf of Planned Parenthood Advocates of Virginia to urge you to support HJ 6007. Without the protections of Roe v. Wade, it has never been more important to do everything in our power to defend reproductive freedom in Virginia. As President Trump and his allies use redistricting as a weapon to cement their power in order to advance an unpopular anti-abortion agenda, Planned Parenthood Advocates of Virginia has a duty to fight back against this unprecedented power grab. Donald Trump and his allies are attempting an unprecedented power grab to steal congressional seats, rig the 2026 midterm election in their favor, and silence voters before we can even have our say at the ballot box. They know their agenda is unpopular and are dead set on avoiding any real accountability from voters. At the president's direction, Republican state lawmakers are redrawing congressional maps to concentrate power and strengthen the party's control in Congress. Make no mistake, if congressional Republicans are allowed to guarantee their majority without voters ever getting a say, they will continue to rubber stamp President Trump's dangerous agenda, further strip us of our freedoms, restrict access to affordable essential health care, and even advance a backdoor abortion ban. Virginians have made it clear time and again that we support reproductive freedom. But these undemocratic efforts to suppress the vote and rig the 2026 midterms are a threat to our freedoms and the Planned Parenthood mission to care no matter what. We must fight back while our rights are on the line. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Crocker from Progress Virginia. Progress Virginia supports this amendment because the voters will ultimately decide putting the power in their hands. This is a fair and proportional response to the unprecedented attacks on our democracy we're currently facing. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Kenda Sutnell. I'm the director of Birth in Color Action Fund, and this is about fairness and accountability. And what we do know is what we've seen across the U.S., our federal government has decided to make all of these different plans for different states. But I am super proud of Virginia for introducing this to make sure that it is in the voters' hands and that fairness and accountability is always put first. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Rhino Tool of Freedom, Virginia. As an organization, we've traditionally only advocated at the state level for policies that promote affordability for regular people. But increasingly this year, we've turned our attention to the federal government because of unprecedented attacks on affordable health care, housing, groceries, energy, and more. Adding on top of that, the wreckage from the federal government to Virginia's workforce and economy, we believe it's more important than ever to give Virginians a stronger voice at the federal level. That's what this amendment does, and accordingly, we support it.
So there's some time left, so I thought I'd come up too. Mike Town, Executive Director, Virginia League of Conservation Voters. For all the reasons already spoken, we support you guys moving forward in this manner, and look forward to working with you over the coming weeks and months to follow through on this process. I think there's, speaking on behalf of environmental issues, a lot of concerns at the national level. We cannot be in a vacuum here in Richmond. We need to be looking at how Virginia is impacted by actions in other states. And I commend you for taking the reins and moving forward as you are. So thank you.
All right. If we can reset the clock. And if those that would like to speak against the amendment, if you could come on up and line up, because that'll help cut the time that it takes between people. Have you all talked amongst yourselves? Is the order and how much time you're using?
I'll be quick.
Okay, I'm sorry, can we reset the clock? I just want to make sure everybody has time to move down. All right, go for it, sir.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Dr. Michael Huffman, and I'm the Executive Director with the Virginia Assembly of Independent Baptists, and I stand before you today to address an urgent issue that could significantly alter our political landscape. It is crucial that we oppose any attempt to amend the commission as it threatens to undermine the concerns of local constituents and the broader implications of fair representation. As Alex Kina of the Political Science Department of VCU highlights, that this reform was designed to be transparent and inclusive, prioritizing community participation over partisan interest. Disturbingly, pressures to modify the commission could invite partisan gerrymandering. We cannot allow ideological agendas to take priority over the will of the people. It raises the question, Madam Chair, why didn't we come together to address the SNAP cuts? Why didn't we come together to address the government shutdowns? Or why didn't we come together to hold accountable the 2 United States senators that are holding this Commonwealth hostage? Why didn't we do that? But instead, resources are frequently devoted to political maneuvering that does little to serve the public. The focus should shift to constructive dialogues that prioritize the needs of the people rather than perpetuating a cycle of partisanship that ultimately squanders taxpayers' money and neglects urgent societal issues. Madam Chair, when I asked several representatives, did any of your constituents send you to Richmond to change this amendment, their response is often, they are concerned about the issues in North Carolina and Texas, and so we must respond. So the answer to my question is no. And if your constituents did not send you here, then why are we here? Perhaps the problems in Texas and North Carolina are that they do not have a redistricting commission. We need to stop talking about Trump, stop talking about other states, and uphold an amendment that was overwhelmingly voted 66% to have a commission just 5 years ago. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm Millad Mikhail, a proud immigrant, a small business owner, a Virginian. Like more than 800,000 Virginians, I voted before this illegal special session was called. My right to know what's at stake was taken away. Now, even our Republican leaders are being denied the right to speak and debate. I came to America to escape a pressure not to be seen happen here. America is special. That's why my family came. Don't silence our voice. Let's protect our freedom and our Virginia.
Can we pause the clock? If we can pause the clock. We will have decorum in this room. It is not a guarantee that this will happen, okay? I would like to be able to hear what every single person has to say, and the clapping will cut into your time. So if we could please keep decorum. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegates of the committee, Jennifer Hubert, on behalf of the Virginia Society for Human Life, we're disturbed by the reckless way the proposed new amendment is being rushed through and the blatant disrespect it shows for the clear will of the people as stated in 2020. Thank you.
Shane Crow, resident of Loudoun County. Some of the delegates here on the committee may recognize me, for I'm a passionate supporter of election reform and making sure that our election process and our democracy is for the better and preserved. Now, when I heard the news about this redistricting commission, I did have to pause and reconsider how I would vote this coming general election, because this is a matter that I take very seriously. And again, I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I know back home I usually speak on behalf of other organizations that advocate for good governance reform. But again, on behalf of myself, I must say, no matter how good the intention may be in trying to preserve our democracy on the national forum, I stand on a principle that we must preserve the manner in which our districts are conducted and formed here in Virginia, irrespective of what other states are doing, to succumb to the temptation of relapsing our redistricting process and leaving it open again to potential partisan gerrymandering may just lead to a further playbook for other politicians to perhaps reenact in scenarios that may be in their benefit later down the line. And while the circumstances themselves about how the President of the United States has asked certain states to gerrymander their districts in favor of his party may seem extraordinary now, in historical context, it was somewhat of a different circumstance, but similar, where other states allowed particular voting manners, where the general ticket, which is a voting method many of our towns and localities use, allow voters to vote for an entire block of like representatives, irrespective of minority representation.
I don't mean to be disrespectful, but if you could see behind you, you're getting the evil eye from some of the folks that want to be a part of this 10 minutes. I just wanted to let you know.
Of course. So again, I would hope that we would sustain against like transient, like partisan issues and preserve the integrity of our redistricting we have. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lynn Bernard, and I'm from Midlothian, Virginia. I'm with Concerned Women for America. I do not support this amendment to the Virginia Constitution. It would essentially overturn the bipartisan efforts for the constitutional amendment empowering civilian redistricting, the Civilian Redistricting Commission. I am concerned that Virginia voters would be disenfranchised. The sovereignty of Virginia, which has been from the inception of this nation a leader in constitutional rights and amendments, should be determined independently by our state and not by the sovereignty issues of other states. Regarding the sunset of this amendment, we recently had a pandemic shutdown that was supposed to last 2 weeks that lasted 2 years. So I have concerns that the sunset clause would be overridden in the future. Thank you.
My name is Ryan Mahaffey. I'm the Commonwealth Attorney for Spotsylvania County. We're told today that the hand was forced by this body because of Texas redistricting, and we're reassured that this is a narrow exception and it's just temporarily allowing redistricting. But what also is the reality of this is that it is designed to only allow Democrats to redraw lines in their favor in response to, quote, the sitting president. It's an obvious partisan effort to seize power. Otherwise, the amendment is useless. We're told that we should tread lightly when proposing a change. And when I was speaking to Delegate Cole last Friday, he was under the impression that this special session was designed to address a COVID accessibility problem with the vaccine. So how can Delegate Cole deliberate carefully on the supreme law of Virginia when he's just seen the language today and he didn't even know about the effort last Friday? If the Constitution is capable of being temporarily bent to the whims of partisan power politics, what use is it? This effort severely weakens the integrity of our constitutional system of governance, and I pray that this body steps back from the banks of the Rubicon. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Ann Robison, and I'm a prayer action chapter leader with Concerned Women for America in Yorktown, Virginia. This amendment, HJ 6007, is definitely an unfiltered, raw power grab that costs Virginians lots of money, $750,000, that has absolutely nothing to do with making our lives better. This hurts everyone, and it hurts every person doing it. The timing is everything, right? This is not about Trump. This is not about a president. This isn't about R or D, you or me. This is all clearly about a God and our heart. It's a heart issue. So I am strongly opposing this HJ 6007. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you. My name is Melinda Ruggiero. I'm from Hanover. Article 12, Section 1 requires 2 votes on a constitutional amendment with a general election in between, so Virginians have a chance to hold their representatives accountable before the second vote. Nearly 1 million ballots have already been cast. As a matter of law, the 2025 election cannot serve as that intervening election. The next valid opportunity is 2027. Anything done before then is procedurally invalid. Keeping the chamber technically open solely so it could be reconvened for this purpose without the governor and without public accountability is a manipulation of the process. A mid-decade map change not ordered by a court, not correcting any legal defect, but triggered simply if another state somewhere else does it first. Let me be clear. Any mechanism you normalize today will be used against you the moment power shifts. You are building the exact sword that will one day cut your own majority down. This body does not have the authority to amend the Constitution by ignoring the Constitution. Respectfully, HJ 6007 must be rejected. The integrity of the process is not negotiable. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Martha Cohen. I'm from Enrico. I agree with all the prior statements, and because there's little time, I just want to say this type of action is what damages the people's faith in this government and makes us feel that we don't matter, even when we voted.
I am so sorry, but I am a stickler for the clock. We have run out of time. I really, really encourage you to go to our hodspeak link and please submit your comment online. Any of those that did not get to speak, we do want to hear from everyone. We're now going to go online. And we unfortunately don't have 10 minutes for each side, but there are a few fewer people. So we will go to those who have selected to speak in favor of the amendment, and we'll put 5 minutes on the clock, please. And we'll go with Mr. Hani Mirza? I apologize if I got that wrong. If you can unmute and we'll go on and start your testimony. And you have to turn your camera on as per our rules for session. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you so much. My name is Hani Mirza. I am with the Advancement Project Action Fund. We strongly support Virginia legislature's courageous effort to protect our democracy during these perilous times. Elections work when everyone has the ability to vote and an opportunity to make their voice heard in a meaningful way. Unfortunately, Republicans have spent much of 2025 focused on answering President Trump's call to rig U.S. congressional districts and elections. Republicans' actions, if left unchecked, would turn the 2026 midterms into a sham election. These extraordinary times require an extraordinary response. We therefore salute the Virginia legislature's effort to answer the call and protect our democracy at this critical moment. We urge the legislature to pass HJ 6007. This measure gives the people of Virginia a chance to vote on this proposal, to allow a new map to be put into place, and to restore fairness to our national elections. Thank you.
Thank you. And Aaron Mukherjee?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Aaron Mukherjee, Senior Policy Advisor at Responsive Gov Action, and I just want to address the timeline issue that was raised. If the voters of Virginia ultimately pass this amendment, there is sufficient time to implement a new congressional map ahead of the 2026 general election. If the General Assembly passes this resolution and the next General Assembly passes it again in January, Virginia can hold a special election 90 days from then, which would be mid-April 2026. The State Board of Elections should then certify the results of that election within roughly 11 days. Specifically, Virginia Code requires localities to canvass results within 10 days of an election and requires the State Board to meet as soon as possible to certify the statewide results of a special election. So the amendment could be effective and the General Assembly could pass a new congressional map by the end of April 2026. Under current statute, the congressional candidate filing window would end on April 2nd, 2026, and the congressional primary would be June 16th, 2026, but states regularly move filing windows and primary dates when there's a need to redistrict. For example, in 2022, New York moved its congressional primary from June to August to accommodate congressional redistricting, and its elections ran smoothly. A later primary is also consistent with other states. Florida, Michigan, and Washington, for example, all hold their primaries in August, while Massachusetts holds its primary at the beginning of September. So in short, the 2026 election timeline does not provide an excuse to hold up this resolution. The resolution can and should be brought to the voters of Virginia. And if the voters ultimately support it, a new map can be drawn and implemented in time for next year's congressional elections.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll now move to online testimony against the resolution, and if we can reset the clock to 5 minutes. And I think there are 3, 3 of you. So I know you guys don't have the same ability to speak in person. So if you could please be respectful that there are 3 of you that wish to speak. And in order to speak, if you'll please turn on your camera. And Robert, I'm sorry, it's 4 of you. If Robert Whitfield, you can go first, and then I'll go on and say Holly Martier, Andy Byer, and Ann Gregorian in that order. Thank you. You have the floor, Mr. Whitfield.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members. I want to talk about how I oppose this bill. So the recent push by Virginia Democrats to amend the state constitution and redraw congressional districts mid-decade is a blatant attempt to undermine the democratic principles that Virginians overwhelmingly endorsed in 2020. This maneuver, disguised as a safeguard against national partisan gerrymandering, is in fact a calculated power grab that threatens to erode public trust in our electoral system. We know in 2020, 2/3 of Virginians voted to approve the creation of an independent redistricting commission, a bipartisan body designed to remove political manipulation from the map drawing process. This reform was hailed as a victory for transparency, fairness, and voter empowerment. Now, just 5 years later, Democratic leaders seek to override that mandate, not because of any failure in the system, but because of political expediency and national party pressure. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Holly, if you could please turn on your camera, it's your turn. All right, we'll move to Andy. Oh, you got it?
Yeah, is this working?
We need you to turn your camera on.
Why isn't it on?
Okay, we'll go to the next one. We will come back to you. Andy Bear. If you could, Andy, if you could, yep, there you go. Andy, you have the floor. Yep, and we need you to unmute. If she could get 2 seconds back, it was at 3:51. Andy, please give me 1 second. We'll try and see if we can get the clock restarted. All right, you have the floor.
Hi, I urge this committee not to move forward with HJ 6007. The anti-gerrymandering provision that was supported by 2/3 of Virginia voters has resulted in compact districts, more fair districts, and this is a political maneuver. And I urge the court to rise above politics and to follow through with the will of the voters. Thank you.
Holly?
I think I figured it out.
There we go. You got the floor.
Yes, I do not want to redistrict. We did once already, and I think that's enough. I mean, it's ridiculous. I could barely remember my district now, but I don't think it's right to keep doing this, and I think we should just leave things as is, and it's just ridiculous. We shouldn't keep doing this. Just leave it as is, and it's not a political thing. It's just, we don't need to do that again. And I believe, I mean, I'm independent, but I believe it's, because the Democrats want to do it. And even if it was Republicans, it shouldn't be for one party. Like I said, I'm independent, but I don't think it's fair to redistrict again. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll finish out with Ann Gregorian. If you can turn on your camera, and you'll have the floor.
Host has disabled my camera, please. Can the host enable my camera, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. I oppose HJ 6007. Legislating by the seat of the pants is not a good look and is never a good idea. Introducing an amendment based on what other states are doing rather than what is actually happening in Virginia exposes this entire scheme as a blatant power grab. None of this is about regular Virginians. And I'll repeat a phrase I've heard often: no kings in the Virginia Assembly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is all of the online testimony that we have. So I will call up the patron. And typically we allow the patron to have, I guess, a summary word.
Summary word. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you again for your time this afternoon. I do not come before you lightly. This is an absolutely difficult and serious consideration. We don't amend the Constitution lightly. We only do that in the most extraordinary circumstances. And I think those are before us today. And for that reason, because we are so respectful of the Constitution, there are numerous and significant guardrails in what we're presenting. This amendment provides options to take action, but not a mandate to take action to redraw lines. And ultimately, we're leaving decision as to whether we even have this process to the voters of Virginia. There is no disenfranchisement here. In fact, there's franchisement here because we're letting the voters of Virginia have a voice to say and respond to what's happening to this country. Madam Chair, again, I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I want to be very transparent. We are being called back to the floor by a time certain. The clerk and their wonderful staff, if anything should be reported favorably out of this committee, need about 40 minutes between that and our time certain for the floor. That was at 2:25. So I am going to extend this by 10 minutes, but I want to let everybody know I cannot go beyond that. So I will now turn it, as is our custom, I will now turn it back to the members. Delegate O'Quinn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Speaking to the resolution. Oh, Madam Chair, sorry. Ooh, I get you in trouble.
Delegate O'Quinn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So very briefly, so we've heard a lot about allowing voters a chance to speak and to have an opportunity to speak. And I guess I take exception to that because 2/3 of Virginia voters spoke in favor of this. And everyone in this room knows how difficult it is to get 2/3 of Virginia voters to agree on anything. There might be one or two issues out there. This is one of them. And so Virginia voters spoke, I would say, exceptionally loud and clear. And Madam Chair, I guess the second point that I would make as it relates to this resolution and whether we can get this timing situation worked out, and I understand the enabling bill itself, but this election is fully underway. The way that I know it's fully underway is that every single person on this dais on both sides has been promoting early voting since September 19th. And in response to that quest to have people vote early, 1.1 million Virginians have taken us up on that, and they have cast their vote. And there is absolutely no doubt that this election is fully underway and is going to be completed in about 6 days. Madam Chair, as it relates to other states, you know, I represent a district where my legislative office is about 50 feet from Tennessee. And I get people coming to me all the time saying, I'm so mad about what Tennessee's done on this, or I really love that Tennessee doesn't have an income tax. What can we do about that? And my response is inevitably, move to Tennessee. If you want to have a say in what goes on in Tennessee or any of the other 48 states besides Tennessee and Virginia, you can move to those states. That's how you have a say in what goes on in another state. And I guess I would ask, Madam Chair, rhetorically, let's just imagine for a moment a scenario where the election goes maybe a little differently than some people in this room think it might. Are you still going to support this 6 days from now? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Cherry.
Speaking to the resolution, Madam Chair.
Delegate Cherry.
Madam Chair, we say words like unprecedented, and something is unprecedented until we do it. We say extraordinary circumstances, and yet no one can define what those are. We've been told that we have no choice but to do something. The short answer is no, we don't have to do anything. We are Virginia. I represent no one from Texas, no one from California, no one from my beloved Tar Heel state of North Carolina. I represent the 74th House District here in Virginia. I believe in my utmost that tying our Constitution to any other state is irresponsible and, to use your word, unprecedented. And quite frankly, it should stay unprecedented because we shouldn't be doing it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Lefwich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've served on a number of bodies, charitable organizations, nonprofits, a school board, and the General Assembly, various boards, commissions, and in this body. And the one guiding principle I've always had is process. What is the process? Our Constitution and present law sets out a process. And what we're doing right now is we're setting out an exception to gerrymandering, and we're doing it with a gerrymandered process. Law requires clerks of courts to give at least 90 days notice of a proposed constitutional amendment, and that's standing in the way. So what are we going to do? We're going to convene the Code Commission, which is appointed by the Speaker, ask them to recommend a change to the law, and then propose that law be changed in January, hoping that it applies post hoc to what we're doing right now. That is a bad process. The clerks cannot comply with current law. If they post the notice, they're violating the law because it's not within 90 days. If they don't post the law, the proposed amendment, they're violating the law because they've done it without 90 days notice. I don't see how, several years ago, I fought against moving all elections, localities, to November. And the argument was, well, we get higher turnout in November. We want everybody to participate. We want large voter turnout for those elections. If we do this, this election on this amendment will go to the voters on a special election. An election I would submit is designed for low voter turnout to get exactly what you want and what we're trying to do right now. I would urge my colleagues to vote against this resolution. It's a conspiracy against the public to participate in an amendment of a Constitution as the Constitution was contemplated and enacted by prior bodies. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Delegate Scott, with 1 minute to go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make it quick. Thank you for allowing me to speak to the resolution. One of the speakers talked about the actions in other states and then said that they will be looked upon as sham elections. And he was speaking in favor of the resolution. What I would venture to say that is, if we were to pass this resolution and were to go to the voters and pass, then we would be entering into the same exact actions that that speaker was speaking against while speaking in favor of this, and then we would have a sham election of improperly drawn congressional districts. Again, we have something in the Constitution that Virginia voters agreed upon. Virginia should be a beacon of what is right and how we should act and how we should conduct ourselves. Our congressional districts are drawn very closely to how Virginian voters vote. While I wish it was a little bit different, it is what it is. And I support the process that's in the Constitution as it is, and I don't think we should circumvent that action.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone who has offered their input. I also would like for it to be known that we got 38 public comments so far. 28 are in support, 10 are against. And you can go, here's the website, hodspeak.house.virginia spelled out .gov to enter in your public comment. We want to remind you it is public comment. Please do not put any of your personal information in there. And before I entertain any motions, I have to say, there was energetic testimony today about being against the resolution. And I do just want to point out the absence of that same energy when Texas began its redistricting. When so what you will do is have decorum. Because I'm going to finish my statement whether we have an audience or not. Thank you. And so the hypocrisy is deafening, especially when we talk about bipartisanship, because there was no bipartisan outrage. I would also offer that the threat to our federal democracy is part of Virginians' concerns. The threat of the fall of the Voting Rights Act. These are extenuating circumstances that have brought us to here today. We are well beyond just partisanship. When you have people that are gleefully redrawing their maps. So we do not exist in a vacuum. And I will also say that when the voters had their say about the redistricting commission, we had minimal, if any, mid-decade redistricting. The Voting Rights Act was not being deliberated at the Supreme Court. Even the East Wing of the White House existed. So obviously, there have been some changes since that vote. And so it is our intention to, with those changes, have the voters have their say with the ballot. And so when we're talking about the previous constitutional amendment, historians are gobsmacked at how fast this country has changed since that vote. So 5 years may sound like a short amount of time, but not when your democracy is directly under attack. And so as the times have changed, the voters do deserve to have their say. So at this time, I will entertain any motions.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to move that this resolution be moved ahead, move forward.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that House Joint Resolution 6007 be reported. And I would ask the clerk to please open the rolls and members cast their votes. And so that does pass on a vote of 12-9. I want to thank everyone for their time, their presence, and mostly their decorum. We will now head back to the floor, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? We are now adjourned.